I got some comments on my video series about how I built my GT40 that assume that you need thousands of dollars in tools to do what I did. So I want to show how that's not true, how I don't have a lot of expensive tools. I buy most of my stuff at Harbor Freight. There's one not too far from here. And it's just kind of the simple things that will let you do the bulk of what I do. I should stress this isn't going to be one of those really cool viral life hack videos where guys do amazing things with tools you didn't know you could do. Those people have used ingenuity to overcome a lack of resources. I don't have the ingenuity, I just have a lack of resources. So to start with, cutting the sheet aluminum, this is from Harbor Freight. It's an electric shear. It doesn't even say what it is, just this power tool. That's, yeah, you know it's quality. And it'll go through 0.065 inch aluminum. That's 14 gauge. Thinner stuff like 40 thousandths or 50 thousandths, it cuts through really easily, and you can actually curve as you cut. It doesn't do super tight radiuses, but you can kind of do a radius and then pull back, and then go a little further and a little further. Its downside is because it can do curves, it's not the great at making a perfectly straight line. And for some reason, I've never gotten around to investing in a proper throatless bench-mounted shear that you can do a really straight line with. I need to do that at some point. They're like $100. If you're cutting steel, an angle grinder. There's a 4.5 inch one. This has a grinding wheel on it, but if you're cutting, you'll use a thinner cutoff wheel. You can buy good ones of these that last a nice long time, or you can go to Harbor Freight and buy a pack of 5 for $5, and they don't last very long, but they're disposable. You just keep whipping through them. Another nice trick is this is called a flap disc. It'll clean off. It will cut into steel, but it's pretty slow at it. So if you need to clean off some welding slag or something like that, this is really good. If you want to do something where you weld a thing in and then you want to hide where the weld is, if you're doing something that needs to look fancy, this is the kind of thing you can do that with and have nice control over what you do. It's also pretty good at taking paint off. In fact, I originally used these the most when I was cleaning up metal for welding. I used to use wire wheels on a drill, which works, but this just works faster. When you're cutting steel that you need really good precision angles on, well, precision compared to a hand tool, you can buy, this is a cheap chop saw. It's meant for wood, and you can tell because my hot metal in here is melting the whatever this is. But you can put a cutoff wheel just like the angle grinder had, only it's bigger. This is a 10-inch one, and this lets you. I can set this to whatever angle I need, and I can set this to an angle as well. And there are much better ones of these you can buy. There are ones that are intended for metal. There's ones that allow you to adjust in different ways. And as cheap as that is, I've had that for 6 years now. And it's been through a lot of abuse, and it shows, but it's still kicking, sort of. When you start doing rivets, if you're drilling, something that you should really get, you can get these at McAster Car. This is a two-sided rivet hole drilling bit, and you get them in whatever size you need. And the reason they're two-sided is you're going to use these up, especially if you're drilling into steel. So what you do is you drill however many holes until this side sucks, and then you flip it around and you do the other one. And you buy them in like a pack of 12 or something. I find if I'm going into 1/8 inch steel, something that really wears out drill bits fast, I can do about 12 holes a side quickly. I can do maybe 24 holes a side if I'm desperate and I don't have enough drill bits. But like if you've just got a set of drill bits and you say, hey, I need a 3/16. Here, I've got my 1 3/16 inch drill bit, and you go to do a bunch of rivet holes, your life's going to be miserable because it's going to do a few holes and then suck, and you're going to wonder how you're ever going to get anything done because it takes 3 minutes to drill out one hole. Get these. This is a pneumatic tool, and it's got two things it does. On this end, you pull the trigger, and this comes up, and it puts a little lip, a little bend in paneling so that you can lay one panel over the other and you'll have this lip that goes over just the right amount for the seam. The other end is a hole punch, and that's what I use more. This is a 3/16. It's perfect for 3/16 inch rivets. And the really nice thing is with a tool like this, you can only put the metal in the distance that it stops there. So if you're going along, that's going to fall. So if you're going along an edge of metal, you do a hole, do a hole, do a hole, do a hole, do a hole. I mean, you should measure the pitch for your rivets, but they're all going to be in a nice straight line as long as you've got the metal in here, which is really nice. You can tell on all of my builds when I was using this and when I was using a drill, because when I use this, if you look down, the rivets are all perfectly straight. I'm using a drill. If you look down a long line, you can see them kind of wiggle a little bit. This is an onyx. So I probably got this from somewhere else. There are places like Trick Tools, Westward Fab, Eastwood, Harbor Freight. These are the usual sources. If you look at vintage race cars in general, you look at the paneling, I think it's the same for airplanes too, it looks like the edge of all the pieces of metal is rounded. And I was baffled by this because, okay, if I buy sheet metal and I cut it, it's got a straight edge. How are they taking it on a grinder? How are they getting this beveled edge? They're using a deburring tool. After you've made your cut, you just run it like that a few times, and it makes the end nice and smooth, not sharp. I mean, it's a good safety device anyways, but it really adds a nice finishing touch. So this one does two sides of the metal at once, and the other kind is this, which does one, and you can put this in the hole, like if you drill out a hole and you need to get any burrs out. And these are also consumables. You know, buy several of these. You'll go through them. If you're doing blind rivets, what most people call pop rivets, don't get pop rivets from Harbor Freight or Home Depot or something like that to use on a race car. Get Avdel rivets. You can get these from McMaster Car. I would say these are the lowest end that you get. These are aluminum ones. They make steel ones if you need stronger, but they also make what they call structural ones. When the stem is pulled out, instead of it just pulling the ball up, there's a solid piece of metal that's still there that you may even have to kind of grind off after the rivet's in. But the point is it ends up being solid all the way through, so it's a much stronger thing. This isn't one. This is a regular Avdel. But this, I've found, is at least as strong as the aluminum that I'm putting it into. So it's strong enough. But if you go on a McMaster Car, you can find all kinds of different types of rivets. Just pay attention to the strength. There'll be a shear and tensile strength. This is the basic rivet gun you'll find anywhere. This one's from Ace. And I refer to these as knuckle busters because, yeah, when you do the cheap rivets from Home Depot, they're fine. If you're doing steel rivets or even these aluminum Avdel ones, it takes a fair amount of force, and when it breaks, if your hand's not like it may take a couple squeezes, and so you end up right here when it finally goes like that, you will hurt your fingers. I always recommend wearing gloves, but if I don't have to use these, I won't. The reason you will always want to have a pair of these is how compact this is. Sometimes, if you're going to see with the other two I've got, you can't get them into as tight a place as you can get these into. For instance, these are much nicer if you're doing a hand tool because you can use both hands. You've got so much leverage that when it goes, you're not going to hurt yourself. So these are much nicer to work with if you're doing a lot of rivets. My race cars have thousands of rivets in them. I didn't have this when I made the Indy car. I wish I had. This is a pneumatic rivet puller. The downside of this is obviously this is big and you can't get it into tight spaces. But as long as it's not tight spaces, it's the difference between doing rivets like 1, 2, and okay, got it. 1, got it. We're doing this. Bam, 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 bam. So this is a wonderful thing to have. Again, not as cheap, but it depends on how much you hate yourself. If you think you deserve better in life, chalk up the money for one of these. Chalk up? Pony up? English is weird. This is something that if you're working with tube steel, you're probably going to need. This is a cheap tube notcher, and what you do is you secure your tube in here. I don't have a small enough hole saw here, but you take your hole saw Oh, that will fit. It'll screw onto there. You put a drill on here, and it'll cut. You can set this at different angles, and it'll cut whatever angle you need. The thing is, you need good hole saws for this to work. What I found is, even buying not the crappiest ones, but the kind of the mid-grade ones, they last maybe like 2 cuts, and then they start, it becomes an exercise in patience. If you know what are good hole saws for tube notching, put it in the comments, because I would love to know. I'm sure you can help other people here. You can get really expensive. You can get like diamond grind ones that I've always wanted to try, because I've found ones that are better than nothing, but I haven't found ones that work really great. Which leads me to my next tip, which is if you don't have one of these, or you just can't stand how poorly these work. In fact, that doesn't even deserve a spot on the table anymore. You can do it. It sounds annoying, but you can do it with an angle grinder, where you make your, say you use a chop saw and you cut whatever angle you need in it, and then you just kind of mark the area that needs to be dished out for it to join up to the pipe, and you just grind it out with the angle grinder. You can start with the cutoff wheel and make a V and then grind it out with this. And it's a lot of grinding and checking. You grind and you put whatever it's going up to and see where the gaps are and where the high spots are. But the more you do it, the better you get at it. And I know that sounds super annoying, but just to express how annoying the tube notcher is with a bad hole saw, this is much less frustrating. So if you're doing rivets, this is the tool you need for when you're putting the panels in. You put these in the rivet holes, and it'll hold the panels in place so that as you're riveting, you don't have to worry about it getting out of line. You put several of these in so everything's lined up right. All your holes, are lined up right. You do them while you're drilling holes too, and that way you're just sure everything hasn't moved and is now out of whack. This next one's going to be a combination of cheap and not cheap. If you have a hole in some sheet metal and you want to dimple it, because that'll make the panel nice and stiff, and it's also just a nice touch. You can do that by just taking a hole saw, cutting a hole in a piece of wood, preferably thicker than this. I just found this lying around. And then just using a ball peen hammer. You can get a nice shaping hammer set, or you can just use whatever ball peen hammer, and just slowly work around the thing and just keep hitting the metal until you get it all in. And if you're patient and persistent, you'll get a nice dimpled hole. When you decide life is too short and you're tired of your holes being slightly wonky, you can buy these. Obviously, they only do one size at a time, where you could, if you've got hole saws, you could make all kinds of different sizes in a piece of wood. And these aren't cheap. I want to say they're $50 a piece, so if you want 3 different sizes, that's $150. But this will not only cut the hole, it'll also dimple it, and it'll look perfect. Woodward Fab, Trick Tools, kind of places you can get these. Eastwood has them, although not very big ones. Obviously, in building the race cars, you've got some really long panels. And I've got a Harbor Freight bending brake that I got for $30. I think it's 33 inches long. And that's nice for doing small things. It's so cheap, you might as well get it. But what I found is, for really small things, I can do them in a vise. I can just put it in the vise and bend it. For longer things, the 33 inches isn't going to work. And now, so for the GT40, I built this guy. I built this for about $200, and it does things up to 63.5 inches. But if you're not going to be that extreme, the simple way to do this is you get hand seamers. This is a more expensive one that's like got this cool clamping mechanism. This is a cheaper one. Oddly, I use the cheaper one more. I don't know why. I just like the way it feels better. And with this, pretend this was a super long piece. Obviously, this isn't. I'm saving this for another bend. But you can mark with a pen, or you could just kind of use the seamer depth as a guide if you want about an inch. Usually, I do my things at an inch or 3/4 of an inch. Kind of flap that I'm going to put in to rivet, and you just keep working your way down the middle, and that's not a very good bend, but you go a little further the next time, and you can do an infinitely long piece this way. It's going to take you time. Again, if you're short on time, you got to spend some money. But if you're willing to be patient, you can do this with a simple tool like this. I can't even tell you how much this cost because it really wasn't much. When the hand seamer isn't really enough for what you're going to bend, a vise is actually what I did a lot of folding with on the IndyCar. And so see, I've taken a ruler and I've put a line through here, and I don't know if this vise is mounted securely enough because this is just an old dinner table and I've never used this before, but here we go. So what I can do is I can just position this in the vise to that line. Again, this vise is from Harbor Freight, so nothing fancy there. So you put that in and you just push it over. Don't go too far at once. I went a little far that time because it'll make this kind of thing there that you can get rid of, but it'll be in your way. And then you go down the line, and obviously this is annoying, but you can make it work. And once you get this fold started, like say just maybe about there, all the way down though, then it's really easy. Speed this up there, because once you've got it started, every time you go to put it back in, it'll stop on the fold that you've already made. So you can just go a little bit more, and you can do this forever. You can have an infinitely long piece. Obviously, the piece I'm bending here is only 40 thousandths. So if you're doing 65 thousandths or something like that, it's more swearing. That's the only difference. And if you end up with, this has some ugly little things here, you can do two things. You can just keep clamping them in here and that'll help smooth them out. Or you put them on the side of your bench, go back to your dead blow hammer, and they'll smooth out eventually. Another thing you can do if you're using thicker pieces of metal is, instead of just using the jaws, put a piece of like a square steel tube in there that's got kind of rounded edges, and that'll give you a smoother radius that you can use to keep your metal from cracking if it's too thick and you're doing too tight of a radius on it. Another thing you can buy, I think it's a cool idea, but I've hardly ever used it. In fact, these are all rusty now because I've used them in years. These are jaws that you put in a vise, and they're made so that you put a piece of metal in and you squeeze the vise in and it bends the metal for you. Obviously, it's only going to do 6 inches at a time, and you should have at least a 6-inch vise to do it. Oh, 5 would probably be fine. We're going to do this. It does work. It's just, I don't know. For thicker stuff, see, this works better than I remember. Hey, yeah, that works pretty nice. I should use that more.